Hey guys, Chaos here's another review. This time I'll be reviewing the Revice remix figure, Kamen Revi and Kamen Revice Rex Genome from the Kamen Revice. This is the first set of this year's new figure line, which consists of two figures that can combine together into a new form. So it includes the two separate riders, Revi and Vice, as well as a pair of alternate hands for each, and two weapons. So, let's get started. First up, we'll look at Kamen Revi Rex Genome, who is basically the primary half of the two. As you can see, his main color scheme consists of pink, teal, and purple. And what stands out immediately is that a lot of the teal is actually a nice metallic color, though some of it is also a more pale color, or just a flat color, to indicate that they're using teal plastic. You can also tell where they switch from the pink plastic to pink paint. So, starting with the helmet, has a very distinct look, especially for the jagged teeth. Not a common feature you'd see on a main rider, especially not a hero rider, but it's quite distinct. You also have these very big eyes, as well as a smaller set of eyes to kind of represent the T-Rex aspect. You see that you got more of that teal continuing on throughout the head. And then you get to the body, where it has the distinct look of basically having a look similar to human muscle, especially when it comes down to stuff like the pectorals, the abs, the biceps, and all that. And then that's covered with these armor parts. So he has these kind of scratches and splotches where bits of the pink lead into the teal. And you also have the Rex Genome symbol here on his left pectoral. Coming down to the waist, we have the Revice driver, which does have in a mold-in Rex Revice stamp, as well as the stamp plate, which actually has the Rex symbol molded in there. Going right to the back, you can see it has this ridge, which also has that metallic teal color, and this part will definitely be part of the transmission and combination. So articulation-wise, this is actually pretty similar in articulation to the Rad Kicks figures, or RKF. Got something of a ball joint at the head, though it is a bit limited. We'll have some up and down articulation of the neck, which is part of the transmission as well. For shoulders, you have a bit of improvement, as while the arms do pop out of sockets quite well, it also has a good range of mobility. You can see that the shoulders do move outward, and you have these hinged shoulder pads that do move along with it. There's actually a secondary ball joint in there that can allow for a bit of a greater range of motion for the shoulders. Have single joint elbows with not only a swivel at the forearm but also at the armor piece. Then you have a wrist swivel, as well as the ab crunch that was known from the RKFs. And hips go forward and back, in and out. Thigh swivel. Single joint knees, but again you have that swivel of the lower leg, as well as an ankle joint. Now, in terms of what this figure is compared to the RKFs, this is basically just a sub-series of RKF. So if we do a little size comparison to last year's main rider, Saber, you can see that they are basically the same height and same size and have a lot of the same articulation. And basically this is the idea of them bringing back a kind of sub-series of RKF, similar to how when they originally introduced them in GO, we had the main series of figures, which were the Rider Armor series figures, as well as the Legend Rider series for past riders. And so that's a similar thing here. They just haven't labeled it as being RKF, but this is basically a spiritual successor to the RKF line, just with a gimmick this time. Now for his hands, has a pair of interchangeable splayed open hands. You can see right there. And it's the same as usual for this type of figure, where you just pull out the old hand from the socket and place in the new one. Even if that does require literally pulling out the arm to do so. And as far as the accessories or weapons go, it's one but at the same time two. Basically, we have two different versions of the Ouing Buster 50. One that's designed to be in gun mode, and one that's designed to be in axe mode. The way you can tell which is that the one for axe mode has a significantly bigger axe blade. So for each one, you can take it and take the handle, squeeze it into the hand. Just like that. So here he is with the gun. And of course we can use this handle here to have him hold up the axe. And here we have Kamen Revice Rex Genome. Now Revi and Vice have a very interesting dynamic, whereas Revi is the rider who actually uses the belt, the one who transforms from a human into a rider. Vice, on the other hand, is basically Revi's inner devil or inner demon, who then gets a physical form and becomes a rider when Revi transforms. Definitely a lot more of a subdued and simple look, and there is an interesting dynamic to it, especially if we take a look at what Vice looks like before transforming. Now what you'll notice from taking a look at that is that basically this is Vice's physical form, but with some rider parts attached to it. Starting off with the head, we can see Vice's face in there with his eyes and a bit of his hair. And then he has this sort of T-Rex hat that he's wearing. And something that I'd like to point out is the fact that all these so-called armor pieces actually have stitches on them, making them look more like they're costume pieces, or sewn together and then that he's wearing. Coming down to the body, it's got this nice scarf that goes around to the back. Got his Rex Genome symbol, which is painted in here. Got some pieces for the shoulders, arm gauntlets, his own belt, which doesn't really do anything, though for some reason it does have Vice stamp holders. You've got the legs with these armor pieces on the sides, as well as shin armor. And coming down to the back, you can see he also has a tail. It's on some joint, but it is also kind of stitched together. And he has pretty similar articulation. You got the ball joint at the head, ball joint for the scarf, articulation of the arms. You also go outward and have these hinged shoulder pads. There is actually a joint for these arm pieces on the shoulder pad, which is more for the transformation. That same kind of thing going on with the elbows and forearms, as well as the wrist swivel. Got the torso ab crunch, torso ball joint. Let's go forward and back, in and out, thigh swivel, single joint knees, ball joint ankles, as well as the swivel of the lower leg. Now there is an interesting and pretty cool detail when you bring the two together, which is basically, something you might notice, is that this purple line along the torso of Revi resembles a 5, and then clearly the one on Vice's chest is 0. So you have them standing side by side. They spell the number 50, since once again this is the 50th anniversary season. Even actually extends to the bottom of their heels, where Revi has number 5 on the bottom of his, and Vice has a 0 on the bottom of his. And this is actually pretty cool because it's not often you actually see molding on the bottom of the feet for these types of standard action figures. So the fact that they put those in there is actually quite a nice detail, and for once, the peg holes on the bottom are actually going to be used for something, but we'll get to that later. Similar to Revi, Vice has a couple of splayed open hands. So we can just unplug one of them, and then plug in another one. And I will just say that I actually haven't changed out these hands before, so that's why it's a bit tough. But I imagine that the more you do it, the easier it'll become. And of course, he can hold one of the weapons in his other hand, using the default hand. Next, we'll get to the remix transformation, which is actually a pretty involved process. Starting from Revi, first thing we're going to do is tilt his head up all the way like this. Take this panel on the back, fold it all the way over and around, and then fold up the hinge here. And make sure his eyes line up pretty well, like that. I'm going to take the arms and kind of pull them out on that socket. Bring it forward, bend the elbows inwards, and then try to bring them together. So basically form the jaw of the Rex. Then we'll take this panel here, which is now revealed. We'll take this piece and pull it outwards till it's like that. We'll take these purple pins on the side and fold them outwards and get him in kind of like a diving pose. And he's about ready. Next, for Vice, I'm going to start by taking these panels, moving it outwards. I'll bring out his arms. Come down to his shin armor. Remove these pieces, and then using the peg in there, I'll put it into holes on the top of his feet. Those become the T-Rex's feet. I'm going to get him into a sort of squatting position. Move the arms outwards a bit. Then we're going to take Revi's feet and plug them into the pegs on Vice's knees. Something like this. And something you'll notice is that Vice has a pair of holes in his forearms. I'm going to plug those into the pegs on Revi's thighs. Note in there when you hear a nice little snap. Well, that one's a bit more of a soft pegging in. Now take these T-Rex arms and move them forward. Just like that. And last major step is to do what's actually shown here. We're going to take the scarf and then combine it with the tail to form the T-Rex tail. So after taking a few minutes to make some adjustments, here we have Revice Rex. So if this looks strange and awkward to you, that's because it is. While we do have the general image of a T-Rex with Revi basically forming out the head, where you can see his eyes becoming the T-Rex's eyes. We've got this piece forming the upper jaw and his arms forming the lower jaw. Then you have the body here and the spine here. And Vice forms with the rest of it, with him extending out the T-Rex arms and him making the tail. We've got these little side panels with the Revice symbol, as well as the little claws down here. But at the same time, you can clearly see that this is one figure holding up another figure. And yes, even in the show, it is butt to face, and it is highlighted, because of course they did. Now, what's unfortunate about this is the kind of thing that really just looks best from a side angle, because if you look at it from the front, it's even more apparent that it's one figure holding up another figure, because you can see, how there's Vice's torso in there and all the rest of his body. And it is interesting that they're doing this, but I would say that this is something that works better in concept than in execution, because, well, it is balanced right now, but it's a balancing act in toy form, because if you have it too far forward, then he will want to fall down. So you basically have to make sure that the center of mass, center of gravity, is on Vice rather than Revi, so that you don't have him toppling over. Especially doesn't work all that well if you happen to have one where the ankles or some of the joints aren't the tightest, so it doesn't hold up all that well, but is at least an interesting combination. Though, let me just bring in something to give you an idea of what makes this even more tricky. And as you can see, here I've brought in the box, and the reason I've done that is because this box here is something you want to hold on to, because it's basically the only way of telling you how to make this combination. This figure does not include instructions. The only thing you have to go off of are these 3 pictographs. Usually these days, instead of including paper instructions, they'd have some kind of QR code to link you to online instructions. But that's not even here. Basically, you have to follow these instructions to try to get it to look something like this. But I don't know how they managed to get it looking like this, just based on the fact that for most figures, I think if you had like this, he would very much fall over. So I think they must have been using some kind of standard, some kind of strings that they edited out to make it look this good. Heck, I didn't even know about this part here. I saw this part where you pull back fin in another person's review. So they don't even get that clear to you. And, I don't think these are bad figures, but I just think this is a terrible mistake, because for most of the past figures, they don't really need the instructions, because the most that they have you do is perhaps switch out a socket or a joint. But this is actually a complex, involved transformation. So I don't really know why they decided not to include instructions, considering that it is something that I think, especially for kids, might be a little bit tricky to pull off. So I do hope that for future releases, they do try to give more proper instructions on how to make the remix forms. And there we go. So overall, this is an interesting set that I actually have rather mixed feelings on. On the one hand, the individual figures are definitely great. They have a lot of nice paint, detail, and articulation. Especially nice seeing a lot of that metallic color on Revi, and there's a lot of good articulation. In fact, I'd say some of it is even improved from last year's Saber figures. Plus it has, a fair amount of accessories, just a simple pair of split-open hands, as well as the Ouing Buster 50 in both modes, so that works well, and you can have either rider hold either of the weapons, which works. The part that gets tricky is just when it comes to the actual gimmick, and the reason why it's called the Revice Remix Figures series. Like I said in the last part, it basically just boils down to the fact that the transformation is a little bit on the awkward side. It is truly a balancing act in toy form, and I just think the worst part of it is how the only instructions you get are pictures on the back of the box. I think of all times to just skimp out and not have any instructions even online, this was definitely not it. And I hope that for any future releases of the figures, or any future releases in this series, they actually do remedy that and include some kind of online instructions at the very least. Another thing to note is that because this is a 2-pack in that you have to buy both figures together, This does cost a bit more, so it makes you wonder just how many releases we're actually going to see within this series, because I don't think that they'd want to be putting out all of the forms because of how expensive it might get. But if you are looking for some good figures for Revi and Vice, as well as you're okay with the idea of how it comes together and you think you can handle it, then I would certainly recommend this set. But at the same time, I would say just to be cautious when going into this. Next time, I'll be reviewing the Deluxe K-Touch 21. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you're new and would like to see more, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. And for now, this is KRX50, riding off.